Let's have a conversation about parents who neglect their children's education. Hi, my name is Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed therapist. I have been counseling women and men who have been victims and perpetrators of abuse for many years now. And I have a question here from a commenter who is asking, I was wondering if you have any wisdom to share regarding homeschool, educational neglect, or hoarding. I appreciate your comment or your content. And then she goes on to talk about how her mother was a hoarder and she felt like, she neglected her education through homeschool. There were some other commenters under that also wanted me to talk about this. So I'll go on to talk about it. In your particular situation, you talked about having a mother who is a hoarder. Hoarding is on the anxiety spectrum. Disorder specifically is a type of, it's like an obsessive compulsive. It's on the spectrum under obsessive compulsive disorders and whatnot. It's also a form, and if you guys have heard me talk about OCD, I've talked about it before. I also think it's a grief disorder. So basically what happens, what I've noticed in working with people who tend to hoard, and it doesn't even have to be crazy hoarding. It could just be like lots of problems with like tons of clutter piles and things like that. But I look at it as like hoarding is definitely a form of grief. And the reason why I say it's a form of grief is because people hold on to stuff, clutter, junk, just stuff that they really don't need anymore because it's tangible. And when things are tangible, they're not, you can hold on to it and it's not going to go anywhere unless you throw it away. Unlike people, right? People or animals that may leave, maybe they leave us through emotional abandonment or physical abandonment. Maybe they die, things like that. And so people usually become overwhelmed with sadness, and they feel very alone in their home. And so, or even in their workplace, because sometimes people will even hoard at their job. And so they hold on to things that are tangible and that sort of represents emotions and things like that they can physically touch and hold on to, whereas people are usually sorely lacking or not there, or they're not able to be emotionally present. So that's the other thing. People who tend to hoard or have that heightened state of anxiety, they definitely have trouble with connecting with people who are here on earth. So for example, if you have a mother that's a hoarder, and I haven't watched the show Hoarders, but I've seen like snippets of it. But when you have parents that are like drowning in the sea of stuff, these people are typically very difficult to emotionally connect with and engage with, or even to talk about problems with. And the reason being is because they have this grief / heightened form of anxiety disorder. For me, from a clinical perspective, any type of anxiety or depressive disorder is a very selfish disorder. I'm not saying that these people are selfish. What I'm saying is these people that have these disorders are usually very self-focused. They can't really get out of their own head, and they tend to spiral a lot with their own emotions. And if they're raising children, if they have children that they're supposed to raise and they're kind of emotionally struggling with stuff, it could seem like they're very self-focused, or maybe even very self-centered, because when you have a hoarder, a lot of times they don't want you to touch their stuff. They don't want you to move or discard their stuff, and they can get very, very even, volatile, if you try to clean it up, because they start to get anxious. You're getting rid of things, and they don't like to get rid of the things that they have. And so they would rather, as crazy as it sounds, they may rather get rid of you because now you're disrupting their own sort of peace. But because this illness is very self-focused, they can neglect people around them that are trying to connect with them because they're too busy trying to hold on to people, places, and things that they've lost long ago, and they're focused on this clutter and stuff, as well as whatever sort of anxious or grief-derived thoughts that they may have. And so with homeschooling, I think homeschooling has gotten a lot better now than what it used to be. But it used to be, parents would kind of be in charge and kids could do whatever. And it might vary from state to state or region to region. I know that there's a homeschooling association. But anyhow, when you have someone that is very self-focused, it's very easy to fall into neglect of their children if they're not staying on top of it. Because with homeschooling, the idea is the parent is supposed to be the teacher. You're still supposed to follow a very similar curriculum to children in school, which requires the parent to sort of be stay on top of making sure that their children are following their curriculum. I have seen firsthand, unfortunately, parents who neglect their children in general. That's also going to manifest in their schooling because they're either checked out, they're tapped out, or they just don't give a damn, just to be frank with you. And so that will manifest, unfortunately, there in the schooling. And a lot of times these parents also aren't aware of how behind their child is unless someone gives them a slap into reality. And that doesn't usually happen unless their child is around other children or something like that, or another parent calls attention to it. And I used to watch the show many years ago, Wife Swap. I think it was either Wife Swap or Trading Spouses. But there was a woman up there who had homeschooled her children for years, and she had like a teenager. I want to say the girl was almost 18 and she couldn't read. And they like publicly called it out. And so unless your children are around that, but however, some parents, even though they homeschool their children, a lot of them they isolate their children as well. So this could be an abusive parent's way of sort of coexisting with their family, is you guys are off into your own little world, almost like hermits. And so it's very easy to neglect and abandon your children. And again, I'm not sure in terms of homeschooling curriculum or the association how on top of that they are, or what they how it works if a child falls behind. But I know I've seen several cases up close and personal where it just seemed to fall through the cracks and there was nothing that happened. But again, that's been years ago. And so essentially, even if a parent is struggling mentally, it is possible for people to have comorbidity with disorders. So it's possible for them to have a medical disorder and a mental health disorder, and a personality disorder, right? So it's possible to be struggling mentally and still be abusive, or neglectful to your children. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen it a lot with parents who have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder and things like that, where they're just so caught up in their own symptoms or in their own world that they kind of forget about the living, breathing beings that are around them. I know that there's also been cases in hoarders unfortunately, where they've actually discovered bodies, trigger warning, under the clutter and things, so where other people have actually died, but no one's known about it because, they've been buried under the clutter. Thanks for asking. Hope this helps. Like, comment, and share.